our chief curriculum designer. So thank you guys so much for taking the time today to share your insights and talk with us. And how do you, as a parent, start that conversation? How is there ever too early of an age to start talking about screen time safety?
Well, I think it's something that starts very early. Fortunately, there are websites where you can download controls for the children, but I think the conversations have to be ongoing. And I think it should start with, one day I was on this website and it started asking me for personal information. And I backed out in a hurry because I became very uncomfortable. And let's talk about what you're going to do if that happens to you, because it happens to all of us.
Yeah, Rona, what is kind of with your background? What are your thoughts there on the kind of the safe screen time?
I would say, kind of to mirror what Suzanne was saying, the earlier the better, to teach our kids and grow that awareness of the internet, grow the awareness of the dangers of the internet. So as soon as their maturity starts to grow, we should be really trying to grow their understanding of what is out there, that they shouldn't be talking to strangers, that they shouldn't be giving out personal information, that they shouldn't be giving out passwords. And parents can actually take a news story, for example, of something which might have happened and actually use that as a story, obviously maybe filtering some of the details and to communicate that message to their children. And the earlier the better, because it's kind of like teaching kids about anything. They need the skills, they need the tools to be going out into the world themselves, because realistically, when they get a little bit older, they'll be taking off the parental controls themselves. So we need to give them the tools to be able to manage that safety online.
Yeah. And what's great is that in our survey, we found that over 80% of parents did closely monitor what their children were doing when they were online and using the tablet, which is great. And I think it's just important to know that we can just have those conversations as soon as they start using those screens and approach it in a friendly kind of educational way, just to stay on top of it and help them make the right choices in case they navigate away from the apps that we're comfortable with. And in terms of the content, we noticed in our survey that games were the content that children most often like to play when they kind of pick up the tablet. In terms of the type of games to look for when you're choosing an app for your kid to use during their screen time, Dr. Suzanne, what do you look for in an app for kids?
Well, fortunately, now we have lots of review sources online and trusted places that will give us good recommendations. And I think most parents want their children to not only be entertained, but to be learning while they're playing. And one way to ensure that that's happening is to, especially with the very young children, share that learning experience so that you become familiar with the games. Usually the children are a little bit more intuitive about how the gameplay works than we are. And sometimes making mistakes with your child is empowering for the child. It makes them feel good. And then I think past that, once you've found good games, work on extending what they're doing. So if they're playing a game such as Lingokids activities that teach words that are about food and the names of foods, when you're in the grocery store, say, do you remember when you played that game? What are the names of these fruits? Is this a banana or an apple? What color is it? And just extend that learning casually. Don't make a big deal out of it, but it's the kind of thing that young parents do a lot anyway, just almost because they want to keep things moving with the child and keep them engaged in some routine activities such as buying groceries.
One thing we really noticed with parents, and I think this is a common topic, like screen time is here to stay. It's more screen time than ever because kids are using it, like Dr. Suzanne, you said, for school. They're using it for extra learning outside. They're using it for entertainment, especially when parents are working or there's a snowstorm or they're home from school due to kind of COVID restrictions. So Dr. Suzanne, do you know, like, what is the amount of time kids should be spending on their tablets or using screen time a day? What are kind of the the current rules, I guess you could say?
Well, the recommendations from the American Pediatrics Organization have actually loosened a little bit. I think it's in recognition of the fact that kids are going to be spending time on screens. And as parents and as a grandparent, there are certainly times when it's a huge relief to have them occupied. So now they're recommending that between 18 and 24 months that the screen time be limited to educational programming and or shared time. And excluded from that is a time when you might be video chatting with a relative or a friend. And then for children 2 to 5, they recommend 1 hour per weekday. And what surprised me was that they're now stating that up to 3 hours a day on weekends are acceptable. And I think with the caveat that it should be educational time, or some of that could be a mix of just entertaining gameplay, but as much as possible, make sure that it's quality time. Over 6 and, from 6 and up, then give the children more freedom with the amount of time. They don't really say a time limit, but they do want you to make sure that it's appropriate and that the children aren't at risk of being in inappropriate areas on the internet. So, and then from there, we get into what kids are doing with homework. I read books online or on my iPad. So there are so many opportunities to be on the screen, which are fine. But again, that's where the conversations have to happen.
And Rona, as parents are thinking about what apps to download for their kids or with their kids, what are your biggest tips for finding a quality app on the App Store?
I would say, first of all, look for reviews. The parents and the users are going to be the biggest voice to tell you which is the most the best app for your child. However, you should try to understand what your child needs. So if your kid struggles with spelling, for example, then try to find them a fun app that will encourage them to practice that skill. Or if they are a super creative personality, try to enhance that. Try to find them an app which really enhances their artistic skills or their musical skills or anything which they are interested in, but you can see a productive and benefit behind, is my advice there. Yeah.
Yes, Dr. Suzanne, what are your tips for parents finding the best kind of apps for their kids on the App Store?
Well, there's one website called Common Sense Media, and that's a great one to go to for finding out about lots of apps and movies, TV shows, all kinds of things. As Rona said, reviews are important, but also talk to your friends, talk to your additional parent friends or grandparent friends and saying, what do you find that's working well? I started playing games even before my grandkids did. And I hate to admit it, but I got just totally intrigued with it. I play Wordle now.
Yep.
First things I do in the morning. And there are great things that stimulate the imagination, as Rona said, and help with learning words, help with playing socially, even if you're at a distance. The Scrabble game, Words with Friends, that has a chat function. And it's kind of fun when I'm playing with a friend to, send stickers that say, oops, I got this. That's 50 points and you just got 10. So, some of that good-natured interaction is fun, and it's fun for all ages. So games that have that kind of social element or paired playing, I think those are great, because then there can be more involvement beyond just sitting and silently playing the game. It's really important that kids have socialization, and that's one of the things that's been tough in the last year. So I think broadening the use also to FaceTime conversations with friends and relatives, sharing what you're doing with your grandparents or your aunts and uncles, and learning the niceties of having a face-to-face conversation. We've lost that a little bit during the last year or so.
How does that impact, or what have you noticed when you're building curriculum for kids within Lingokids, in terms of playing alone or playing with the family? How do those things kind of factor into the content that you build?
So actually, a lot of our content is designed for the child to be able to access it individually, but we do have games that are play together games, and they have been designed to be played with the child and their parents. Where they both need to interact together, play together. And actually, we're working on a new project, which is going to be a handbook for parents, which will be full of tips, full of activity ideas, full of games that will be all off screen to coincide with our curriculum on the app as well. So imagine if you had the objective of one of our games was to count up to 10, then we'll provide lots of activities and games that you can enhance this and reinforce this this idea, this learning nugget into the real life.
And as you think about like learning games versus videos, and kind of I feel like kids are drawn to both, but they usually prefer either games or watching videos. Like how do you think about that, kind of the passive versus active screen time, Rona? And how that goes into what parents can feel comfortable with their kids doing?
I would say something interactive is always going to be more beneficial than something passive. And this is proven by Bloom's taxonomy, which is why so much of the content that we provide is interactive. And it's important because that's how they learn. That is, they are working to get the correct answer. They are working in order to choose the correct word. But if it's just passive video, they're not going to retain maybe 90% of that. So it's key. And to reinforce this learning that you've done on screen or at school, and then reinforce it at home is great. So even if a child has a favorite game that they like to play online or on an app, if you can try and build that game off screen in your own home, that is a really, really cool learning experience for the kids. And they still get to play their game, but they're interacting with you, they're bonding with you, they're learning so many skills in order to create this game, and then they can play it, and they can even invite their friends over. And as Suzanne was saying, this is something which is key after the pandemic, is to really increase the social contact with their peers.
And before we wrap up here, I just want to get your last best tips for staying safe online, or your favorite kind of apps for kids to engage in. Just final words to impart on our community here at Lingokids. So Rona, I'll go to you first.
I would say a general tip for parents, which really kind of covers a lot of what we've spoken about today, is if your kid is engaged in something, whether that's dinosaurs or Frozen or whatever it might be, use that as a tool to motivate them to learn, to do whatever you need them to teach, use that as a tool to teach them whatever you need. So in this case, it's about internet safety. It could be about crossing the road. It could be about not touching a hot pan. It could be literally anything. Use this as like a base to engage them, to motivate them. So imagine if you're trying to teach them about crossing the road. You invent a story using the characters from their favorite movie or their favorite story or their favorite game. And you use this to be creative and say, oh, but Elsa wouldn't cross the road like this, or whatever it might be. And you can even make them like reward charts, or using the theme of whatever they seem to be like involved in that phase. They change phases so quickly, but it is a really good tool to motivate them and engage them in the teachings of life, let's say.
Yes, in our house, Spider-Man gives a lot of great tips for safety.
Exactly. Yes. Don't
very
climb the walls.
Exactly. Dr. Suzanne, what are your final imparting tips to the Lingokids community?
Well, we haven't talked about cyberbullying. So if you notice that your child, if they're 9 or 10 or a little bit older, if you notice that their behavior has changed suddenly, start getting suspicious, because you don't want something like that to go on. And find out what your school provides for internet safety and what kind of controls they have in place. And then be sure that your child is adhering to that. And the other thing, and this is maybe just a little bit sneaky, but watch your phone charges and any credit card charges, because if you see something appearing that you didn't expect, especially if you have a tween or a teen, you need to do a little digging and keep that conversation going. I think that's the most important thing. And remember, it's like any good story, it needs to be told repeatedly. So you need to keep going back to your expectations and the risks without frightening the children. Monitor that based on their age, but be sure that the open conversation can happen from both directions.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect tip to end on. Just keep those communication lines opening, keep talking with your kids. And yeah, that's a great way to keep them safe online and keep a close relationship with them, engaged with what they're doing. So thank you, Dr. Suzanne and Rona, for joining us today and imparting your knowledge on us. I learned a ton. I'm sure our community did too. And we'll be posting this on our social channels. And so feel free to drop us your comments and questions, and we'll try and respond to them there or in future webinars and sessions. So thank you all so much.
Thank you
very much. Thank you. It was very nice.
If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. And don't forget to download the Lingokids app so that you can explore our in-app parents community and be part of all the great families around the world who are raising amazing kids. For ideas on activities to do with your child, or for general parenting advice and conversations, subscribe to this channel. See you next time.